Hello everyone, welcome to the Hindu analysis for 20th February 2021. Let us begin with the first article today. 4 PLA soldiers died in Galwan, China. China yesterday came out and said that they lost 4 soldiers in the Galwan clashes that happened on June 15th. If you remember correctly, on the same clashes, our Indian government immediately came out and said that we lost 20 soldiers today and honored them immediately. But the Chinese did not do that. For 8 months, they remained silent and they refuted any questions raised by the journalists and media regarding the loss of life on the Chinese side. But yesterday, they came out and said that we lost 4 soldiers and 1 was seriously injured in the Galwan clashes. But in reality, our observers from the Indian Army side and some international organizations said that Chinese approximately lost anywhere between 45 soldiers to 60 soldiers. Our claim was that it was 60 soldiers. The Americans said that they lost close to 35 soldiers, but a report from a Russian agency called TASS report officially acknowledged Chinese sources saying that they lost 45 soldiers in the Galwan clashes. It was the first and worst violence recorded on the border between India and China since 1967. There were skirmishes happening between Indian side and the Chinese soldiers from time to time based on patrolling points and who is patrolling where and all that, but they were never violent. Such huge loss of life was recorded. So since June, PLA was very silent. A Hong Kong-based South China Morning Post that Beijing was very sensitive about military casualties, saying all the numbers had to be approved by President Xi Jinping, who heads the Central Military Commission, before being released. So one of the sources was saying that if the government of China is going to release any official death casualties or death numbers to the news organizations or the public, the confirmation or the approval for release of the number of casualties should come from the President of China himself, Xi Jinping. Without his consent and permission, the PLA cannot release the casualty number or even an approximate number of casualties that they suffered in any combat situation. Particularly in the case of Galwan, it was very sensitive issue because the Chinese did not expect that kind of resistance from the Indian side. Their readout and their PLA official statement was full of rhetoric and saying that the Indian side was the aggressor. Even they released a video showing the soldiers who lost their life, and in the video the entire structure of the video is created in a way that Indian side has been showcased as the aggressor, not the Chinese side. But in reality, everybody knows that the Chinese side encroached into Indian territory and initiated the attack on Indian soldiers. Coming to the next article, India-China complete Pangong withdrawal according to agreement. So the 9th level commander talks, India and China agreed that they are going to de-induct their troops from Pangong Lake area, and India will fall back till their permanent position at finger 3 and China will fall back till finger 18, and in between whatever the area is located, they are not going to patrol till further modalities are discussed. Now it has been confirmed that both India and China have completed the disengagement on the north and south banks of the Pangong Lake area in eastern Ladakh, and now it sets the stage for the 10th commander level talks where other contentious areas will be discussed. So these 10th level Corps commander talks are to be held in Moldo on the Chinese side around 10 am. So as far as the Pangong Lake area is concerned, disengagement was fully complete as per the agreement and has been jointly verified by the both sides, meaning both sides went and verified each other's engagement sites and said that every missionary including the soldiers have been pulled back, and the natural landforms, meaning whatever the bunkers, whatever the foxholes they have dug, they have all been restored to the natural landforms. The agreement was that everything has to be turned back till April 2020 status. Now according to the agreement, all the structures that the Chinese side and the Indian side have built in the north and south banks, those all structures have been removed, including tents and helipads in Chinese side. The other major friction areas between the two countries are Gogra, Hot Springs and Depsang Plains. These three are the most important standoff areas between the three sides, particularly the Depsang Plain, meaning, see, north and south banks of Pangong Lake area was the only area where the Indian army had the upper hand. In the last few months of the standoff situation, our Indian army went ahead and occupied the Kailash ranges in the Pangong Lake area, meaning our Indian army had the dominant position in the Pangong Tso Lake area. But in the case of the hot springs and Depsang Plains, particularly in the case of the Depsang Plains, the Chinese army have the upper hand in positions and logistical terms. Now, during this first stage of disengagement, where both sides agreed to withdraw their troops from Pangong Lake area, but we had the upper hand in Pangong Lake area. But in the case of Gogra, Hot Springs and Depsang Plains, the Chinese have the upper hand, meaning they occupy the dominant positions, and our Indian soldiers are stationed at the valley level, where the Chinese soldiers oversee the Indian camps and Indian locations. But at the 10th level, that is going a commander level talks that are going to take place today on the Moldo side of the Chinese LAC, the modalities for de-induction or disengagement in these three other areas will be discussed. We have to be very careful of the Chinese intentions here, and we have to see that a complete disengagement from the Depsang area, particularly because it is very important strategically for India and it is very near to our choking points. So we have to wait and see what this 10th level corps commander talks will result in. And to ensure that there is no violation of the agreement by the China, there is monitoring by unmanned aerial vehicles, and cameras have been installed at several locations. Now, since the disengagement process has been completed in the Pangong Lake area, it is up to us to verify the Chinese never repeat this again. Now, in order to verify and keep an eye on the Chinese movements, both unmanned aerial vehicles and cameras with high resolution lenses are being used to monitor the ground situation on a 24-hour basis. And particularly in the case of North Bank, Chinese troops have withdrawn to east of Finger 8, while Indian troops have moved back to the post near Finger 3. We have a permanent post in near Finger 3. We are moving to our old positions. China has also moved to the Finger 8 position, where the perception of our LAC lies. So, but the agreement states that we cannot patrol till further modalities will be worked out. Coming to the next article, too many IITs, unrealistic expectations. So, since the introduction of IITs, we have clearly seen an decrease in the quality of IIT education, but the demand has been growing exponentially. Though the quality has been reduced or has been declining since the introduction of IIT as educational system or educational institutions in India, the quality has been declining. The factors can be attributed, various factors can be attributed for the decline of quality in IITs. Indian Institute of Technology or the IITs are the crown jewels of Indian higher education. That is well established. Any engineering student, any technical educational student wants to get admitted into IITs. Close to 8 to 9 lakh students write the IIT's entrance exam every year, hoping that they get seat in an IIT in India. That is how valuable and important the IITs are in Indian education system. They are among the few Indian higher education institutes that do reasonably well in the global rankings. Every year, some or the other organizations come out with a global ranking of higher educational institutions in the world. Only IITs like IIT Mumbai, IIT Kharagpur, IIT Kolkata come in at least some of the top 100 rankings. For the past decade or so, IIT system has expanded beyond its capacity to maintain its high standards, and it is in danger now. The declining aspect of the IITs has been established and well understood. The recent decision of the Universities Grant Commission to permit select IITs under the Institutions of Eminence category to set up campuses abroad could further weaken these already stretched institutions. Now, recently the UGC came out and said that we want a global appeal for our IITs. So from now on we'll allow few select IITs to open campuses in foreign countries. Till now the government did not allow IITs to set up campuses in foreign countries and foreign universities to set up campuses in India. But recently they changed their stand regarding that and said that we will allow foreign universities to set up campuses in India. Likewise we'll allow Indian institutions to set up campuses in foreign countries. But the direct net impact of such a decision from the Universities Grant Commission is that IITs have few resources, and with this decision the limited resources that they process now will be stretched to breaking point. That is the ground reality here. They are already lacking with resources. Once they open campuses in foreign countries, whatever the limited resources they have now will be stretched too thin to meet the demands of the domestic student or domestic needs. Now it is time to rethink the changing role and mandate of IITs in order to ensure that quality and focus are maintained. Because of the lack of resources and how far and widespread they are now, their mission and the entire idea behind the concept of IITs and such institutions has been lost, because there is an urgent need to expand. But it had an inverse relation with the quality and quantity of the IIT educational system. When the IIT system was initially introduced, they had unlimited funding from the central government, and IITs were exclusively founded on technology and engineering ideas. Their entire idea behind the setting up of IIT and IIT educational curriculum and system was to enhance our understanding of technology and information, so that these students who come out of these institutions can help in development of our country. But they later added humanities and social sciences to the curriculum also. Initially they said that we'll only concern ourselves about technology and information. Later, after a few years and some considerations, they said that now we'll add humanities and social sciences subjects to the curriculum also. But these programs were modest till 2020 NEP policy. In 2020, government came out with the National Education Policy, and the National Education Policy emphasized the IIT should focus more on holistic and multidisciplinary education. Since inception, the only discipline they were concerned about was information technology and communication technology. Later they said that we'll add histories and social sciences, like humanities and social sciences. With the advent of 2020 National Education Policy, the government observed that they need a more holistic and interdisciplinary approach for the educational system at higher levels. According to data available with the Council of Indian Institutes of Technology, the IITs are small institutions with average student enrollment in 5 older IITs of around 10,000 students. Some of the newer IITs remain quite small with more than or fewer than 400 admissions. The data directly seem to indicate that they have the topmost IITs, the top 4 IITs like IIT Kharagpur, IIT Mumbai, IIT Delhi, all these combined have an admission capacity of 10,000 students. That is well and good in the top categories of IITs. But there are some other IITs which are smaller and newer in nature. In these IITs, the admission level is very low. In that cases, they have full capacity there to the brim. But in the cases of new IITs which are located in rural areas, the admission level is still very low and doesn't meet the criteria. Why is that? The first thing that you have to understand regarding IITs is the IITs are not universities. They have neither the range of disciplines nor the size that characterizes universities worldwide. Whenever you look at Harvard University, whenever you look at Cambridge University, these universities are huge. They have hundreds of disciplines, hundreds of courses, thousands of students with thousands of different faculties and international faculty there. But when you come to IIT's case, the number of courses that IITs offer are very limited. and the faculty range is also very limited, because as I said, if you remember from the early stages, their resources are limited. Their funding had dried up because priorities changed, and these resources had to be spread far and wide and had to be shared with other IITs. You cannot compare our IIT educational system with that of foreign multi level institutions such as Oxford or Cambridge. We try to compete with them, but their level of resources and their level of expansion modes or methods that were adopted by Cambridge or Oxford were never applied with IITs. And the intent was also not to develop multi-level, multimodal institutions. The entire goal behind IITs was to develop science and technology in India, come out with curriculum that would boost our technical knowledge, that would give us technical engineers who can solve India's problems. We were never of the opinion that IITs will be the whole and sole answer for the higher educational crisis in India. But somewhere along the way, IITs became the whole and sole solution for our Indian higher educational needs particularly. That was never the intent. That is why they are seeing a decline in quality, and that is why in front of our eyes we are seeing our international global rankings of IITs falling every year. Now, IIT started as undergraduate institutions. They gradually added small post-graduation programs. Their intention was never to become a whole and sole university. They started with undergraduate programs where India was in need of technical undergraduates who can fulfill our own domestic needs. Later, they realized that they need to change and adapt to the times. They added small programs of post-graduation programs. But now, IITs have the highest percentage of postgraduate admissions. Forget about the undergraduate part. These institutions became the centers or magnets for post-graduation courses in India. They had around 58% of admissions in post-graduation courses in the last 2 or 3 years or so. The second thing is faculty. One of the most important aspect of any institution or any university is the quality of the faculty. When IIT started, top faculty, meaning top teachers, professors and assistant professors in India wanted to work in IITs because they felt that IITs attracted the smartest and the brightest minds in India into their campuses. So these teachers and these professors and these associate professors wanted to interact with those students and work with those bright minds in India. But again, this also led to a downgrading, because I'll tell you why. In the initial phases, students were coming in, topmost faculty was there, so everything was going on well, and some of the students who were studying in those IITs later on became professors and associate professors in their respective IITs. But what happened with the advent of software industry in India is the salary that was paid by IITs was never enough. It never met the global standard for pay scale of a university level professor or associate professor. With the advent of private companies in India, these companies started attracting bright and intelligent students into their companies with pay and facilities. And the second thing was, these old top professors and associate professors also retired from it, but there was no fresh crop of professors or associate professors to take their place, because whatever the new students who were coming out of these universities with top marks and top percentages were immediately attracted by the private sector. These students never had the intention to go into teaching side or become a professor or anything like that, because they see that the pay that a professor is getting is low and the amenities that they are being provided is low, and the pay in private sector is very high. Second thing is, only few IITs are located in urban areas. More than 10 to 15 IITs are located in rural areas like in Kerala, in Uttar Pradesh. Second thing is, state governments also, whenever a state government or a state gets an IIT institution into their state, initially they show full enthusiasm to support the institution. Later on it wanes down because they stop interacting with the IITs, they stop funding, they stop everything. Initially they show very much interest to get the IIT into their state. Once the IIT is in the state, they'll forget about it. and they stop using it effectively to utilize the presence of IIT in their state, and they'll stop sharing of information with the IITs, and they never involve the IIT and the IIT curriculum or IIT infrastructure into the state. These are the few reasons. One is funding. Second thing is stretching of the resources, stretching of the limited resources till the breaking point. Introduction of numerous number of new IITs where there was no need in the first place, because this led to increase in the demand of professors while there was little supply of qualified and top-notch professors and associate professors to teach the students. Third, when top IITs were attracting in the initial stages, with the advent of new IITs, there has been a difference between these difference created an urban and a rural component of IITs. Urban IITs that were situated in urban areas were attracting high number of students, top-notch faculty, as well where IITs located in rural areas had the bad name that they might not have world-class facilities and any facilities at all. This was one of the few issues that led to the decline of quality of IITs. Now, what is the solution? How do you come out of this rut that IITs are in now, and how to restore the quality of IITs and ensure that they bring out the old golden days of IITs in India? Now, while excellent engineering / STEM institutions are needed, they all do not have to be IITs. We have to get out of the idea that the name IIT itself will ensure admission and prosperous growth. We have to come out of that. Not every institution, not every eminent engineering college, not every eminent university should be named IIT. You can come out with an IIT with you can come out with an institution with a different name and ensure that you give the same amount of knowledge, if not more than what IITs provide, by expanding their areas of interest. Let us not only worry about engineering or information or technology, let us expand more into humanities and social sciences also. Now, a more limited IIT system needs to be funded at world-class levels and staffed by world-class faculty, perhaps with some recruited from the top universities internationally. You have to rethink of a whole restructure of IIT system in India. First, you have to reduce the number, or at least let us not bring some more new IITs. There are currently 24 IITs right now. Let us limit the number of IITs in India to 24. Now, let us take these 24 IITs and start recruiting top-notch professors from international universities. Yes, we have professors in India, but they do not meet the demand that we currently have. So let us find new professors and attract them with good pay scale, good facilities, and bring those who are interested to work with Indian students, who are interested to work with Indian culture into our universities, and we can reciprocate by having that share of cultural differences and ideas from Western universities, top universities especially. These professors who come from foreign universities, sometimes they give a new perspectives to local students who may never have experienced other points of views. Starting overseas branches is a bad idea. As I said earlier, these resources are very limited and you want to stretch them furthermore and break the resource cycle altogether. This will destroy the IIT ecosystem in India. At the end of the day, these institutions are answers to our technical needs. These institutions bring out students with top quality ideas, top quality research. If implemented correctly, these bright minds will be a solution to our problems. But that has to be taken up by both policy level and employment level also, because their pay has to be good if they want to work in India. That has to be considered also. Now the IITs need robust policy to attract international students, and of course adequate and sustained funding is mandatory. Funding is the whole and soul cross problem of everything. The government must ensure these eminent institutions have unlimited funding, because these are the hotbeds of ideas and research in India. We have to ensure that we need R&D right now, and these institutes ensure R&D in India. And if the funding is good, nobody wants to go outside. They can happily do their research in India itself, because they know that their project is going to be funded here. That is the trust the government has to create in IITs again, which was lost after few years, both from the government and philanthropy of tremendously successful IIT graduates at home and abroad. See, one difference that you observe from Cambridge University to IITC is, once a student leaves the Cambridge University or Oxford University, since day one they get the job, they'll start sending checks to their university. They'll send donations to their universities. They buy technology, they buy machines, they buy computers, they they pay for repairs, they do everything. These students who come out of Oxford and Cambridge and Harvard universities ensure that the quality of their university stays top notch. They pay from their own pocket in form of donations to their universities. But in India, the concept of donations has never existed. It is high time for old alumni of IITs who are staying in India and abroad to start thinking about the quality of their home institutions. They should at least try to come back to their old alumni and try to repair the damage that has occurred. And simultaneously, the government has also must infuse some funding and some new technologies into IITs. Coming to the next article, 1 crore vaccines given in 34 days. So as of yesterday, India has surpassed 1 crore COVID-19 vaccine doses officially. We are the second country after United States to vaccinate 1 crore people. Albeit the 1 crore people are healthcare workers and frontline workers, but in the next few days we are going to start inoculating people above 50 years of age. Here our health minister has come out and said that there is still a lot of vaccine hesitancy, and he said that I humbly and strongly appeal to all healthcare and frontline workers to come forward to take the vaccine. He's trying to combat the vaccine hesitancy situation that has been prevailing in India. He is requesting healthcare workers who are being reluctant to take the vaccine to come forward so that we can fight COVID together. Coming to the next article, US ready for talks on Iran deal. So when Trump was President of United States, stating that the Iran nuclear deal was unfair and he pulled out of the nuclear deal. Till now, European partners in the deal were holding Iran to ensure that they do not develop nuclear weapons. Now, the Biden administration has said that it will participate in talks with Iran with a view to reinstate the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. The Iran nuclear deal name is Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, and they will try to rejoin it. They said that we'll restart negotiations with Iran and we'll rejoin the Iran deal in future so that Iran doesn't develop nuclear weapons, and we will lift the sanctions that were imposed by the Trump administration. The United States said that they would accept an invitation from the European Union High Representative to attend a meeting of P5+1 and Iran to discuss a diplomatic way forward on Iran's nuclear program. Now, they said that we are waiting for an invitation from the other members of the grouping so that we can restart or re-engage with Iran to discuss a diplomatic way for nuclear to develop its nuclear program. But Iran has threatened to partially stop International Atomic Energy Agency inspectors to visit their nuclear installations next week if other parties do not follow the agreement modalities. So according to the nuclear deal, International Atomic Energy Agency will send its inspectors to Iran's nuclear installations, where they will verify whether Iran is adhering to the agreement or not. But Iran yesterday threatened, after United States came out and said that we will start re-engaging with Iran. They said that we'll stop those inspectors visit from the next week if US doesn't lift the sanctions that Trump imposed. This is directly, they are again saying that you lift the sanctions that you imposed on us, then we will see of talking. Otherwise, we will negate on the whole deal and we will start our own nuclear weapons program. Coming to the next article, PSC policy. So the new public sector enterprise policy envisages that the strategic sectors have to be limited to 4 only. Now, according to the disinvestment plan, the government says that they are going to be only investing in 4 strategic sectors. This is as per the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan. The Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has announced that there would be a maximum of 4 public sector companies in strategic sectors, being they will start only concerning about 4 sectors in which government will have PSUs. In the rest, we are going to start disinvestment and we will start privatizing them. And they'll say that in these 4 sectors only the government will have state-owned firms, and in other sectors whichever apart from these 4 strategic sectors, if the government has any state-owned companies or PSUs, we will start privatizing them also. Meaning disinvestment plan is still going on. We are very much in accordance with disinvestment, but we are not entirely privatizing everything that the government owns. We will have 4 core sectors where the government will own PSUs. So the government wished to have a strong and impactful public sector in strategic sectors and MSMEs. Again, these MSMEs might be defense, infrastructure manufacturing, power, petroleum, coal, mining, ports, airports and many more, which will help to create better running of the government's assets. This is the new government's public sector enterprise policy that was announced in the 2021 budget. Thank you. Have a good day.